Today's date is May 24, 2017. This is Yalak. My lesson is entitled The Language with No Name. I'm looking at this whole issue again of the Hebrew language and what is the language that the Hebrews of the Old Testament and the patriarchs spoke way back then. And as you know, I've talked about this before. I'm still looking into it because, again, it's still a shady kind of topic. You'll hear me ask questions like this often in my videos because I really am unsure. I'm not like one of the other people that you're going to just listen to and every time he comes with a video, he's sure about this and that. He can tell you this and that to make you believe. I'm just trying to find the truth just the same way most people are trying to find the truth. But as I look into the issue of the language, the more I read is the more I understand that I need to ask further questions, and the more I understand I need to read extra, a little more than what I wanted to read. When I look at the Bible chronologically, reading from Genesis, if you look in the book of Genesis, chapter 10 and 11, it tells you in chapter 10 about the different groups or nations. And then it comes down to a part where it says, by these were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad, or something like that it mentioned. And a few verses in Genesis chapter 10 lets you start to question some things. And remember, I was looking at the chronological reading plan for the Bible, and I understand they tell you, sometimes they'll say like read Genesis 1 to 11 and then switch and go read the book of Job and then come back to Genesis. And because they're saying based on the time Job happened or Job lived, it should be inserted right at that point. So you have to break Genesis to get over to Job and then you come back. But look at a verse like Genesis chapter 10 and verse 5. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue and after their families and their nations. And then you look at this guy in verse 8 and 9. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord. And, as some have said, this man apparently was working for God, even though we've been taught that he was doing evil. But it seems that some have a different view of this, that he was actually doing the work of the Most High. So whatever the truth is with that, it seems that somehow he has become, like maybe one of the greatest demons in the ancient world, even though it says he was before the Most High. But if we run on here, verse 18, the latter part says, and afterward were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. Verse 20, these are the sons of Ham after their families, after their tongues, in their countries, and in their nations. And you go down to another verse here, verse 31. These are the sons of Shem after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nations. So we find that these different sons had their families and they had different languages on the earth. And verse 32 ends the chapter saying, these are the families of the sons of Noah, after their generations in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. So are they saying right there, after the flood they were divided and they had their own languages, even the children of the Shemites? So they had their own languages. They were speaking many different languages. And verse 11 picks up saying, chapter 11, saying, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. So it makes one wonder if this is a chronological outline, then why is chapter 10 placed before chapter 11, so that it gives the impression in the mind that there were lots of languages being spoken by different groups of people, and then afterwards you're being told that only one language was being spoken on the earth, and then they got split up into different languages at the Tower of Babel. But I guess some say chapter 10 and chapter 11 should be switched around a bit, so that's the explanation they give. It's kind of tough to argue with that. I see the sense, the logic in that, but it still makes me wonder, why then is it a chronological list like this that just messes the whole thing up? Like, you figure if it's a chronological order, that it should have been arranged much better. But I mean, keeping that in mind, because it may well have been that the chapters needed to be switched around a little bit. But when you keep that in mind, though, I notice that when it comes to the people that the creator is working with, that their name seems to have been, for want of a better word, under some kind of an attack. Because some are saying they're not Hebrews, and then they say they're Haberus. Well, I mean, then Hebrew would be kind of a close play on the word to make it sound similar while giving you something else. Then some are saying it's this, that, the other. So it's all kinds of trickers. One thing is very clear, though, is that there seems to be a strong truth in all of this doubt. For people doubting the Bible and doubting the Israelites and the children of the Most High before they were called Israelites, because why all of this consistent historical confusion over this one little group of people? Why? If there was not some truth to their history. It seems to me like there has been a lot of effort and money put into the publishing of so many books and people being paid off and so on in our modern times here to hide the history of this people and their language, as I'm talking about here. But not only that, but in ancient times, in the story of the Bible itself, you're finding that, and even in extra biblical sources, even items you'll find in museums and so on, and studies that they found, it's showing that there were a lot of fightings with these people from other nations, as if this little nation was just being constantly aggravated. They were being fought against, and no sooner than they end up transgressing against the Most High, their God, some nation was waiting on the outside to stab at them and to break them up and so on, as if they are so threatened that, wow, they fell into transgression, their God is angry at them, now is the time to take these fuckers out. I mean, pardon me, but it's like they were just like the birds that are just like hovering overhead, just waiting for the right time at noon time or so to just swoop down and just grab up any little piece of, it's like they're just always swarming around, just waiting for just give us one opportunity to hit these people. Just one. Like, these people are just so hated. But it seems like with that kind of hate and the hiding of information and so on, that whoever gave us the modern form of the Bible, because I don't know if the ancients would have presented it that way in their scrolls. I've never seen the original scrolls. Nothing in a museum today convinces me that what's shown in museums would be one of the original scrolls or an untainted copy of an original scroll. Because when you look at the language issue now, for this people that's been so targeted from ancient times in the Bible and extra biblical sources and up until modern times, it seems that both the Bible itself and, well, actually the Bible itself, the people who descend from these people who are still alive today, don't have any way to really show themselves or give their own language speak for themselves that this is our tongue from ancient times. It's very difficult. And we'll say, well, it's because we were broken down, we were cut off the curses and so on, so we got destroyed, lost our identity and so on. Okay, I can understand that. But it seems that the Bible itself and the God of the Bible does not, they don't seem to be very clear, both of them, on the language of this people. Like their identity seems to be under some kind of threat, and their language is unclearly spoken of. Zephaniah 3:9 says that the Most High says he'll return a pure language eventually. So it seems easy to say it's because the Hebrew today is not as clean and pure as it was originally, so it's going to be restored to a pristine condition, right? Like what it was originally. But it makes one wonder, because when I look here at Isaiah 36:11, it says, Then said Eliakim and Shebna and Joah unto Rabshakeh, Speak, I pray thee, unto thy servants in the Syrian language, which I guess they're saying is Aramaic, for we understand it, and speak not to us in the Jews' language, or in the Judeans' language, in the ears of the people that are on the wall. So, again here, just the use of the Jews' language. You say, well, they said Syrian language, so what's the point if they say the Judeans' language? Because they're saying the Syrian language. They didn't say, spell it out and say, speak to us in Aramaic. So why do they have to say, don't speak to us in Hebrew? But, I mean, the thing is that this is the book of the Hebrews. So you figure if they're just going to not acknowledge somebody else's language too easily, the Aramaic, then it shouldn't be a problem for them to mention their own tongue, Hebrew, because this is their book. This is home. This book is like home base. So mentioning Hebrew should just be commonplace and easy. But it just always stood out kind of strange to me, even in the Christian church, the Jews' language, which really means the Judeans' language, or basically the language of the Hebrews, I guess one could throw in there. As opposed to just simply saying, speak to us in Hebrew. As if there is some kind of deliberate attempt, or it wasn't thought about much, so it's just like in the language of the Judeans, as if we don't really want you to know which language they actually spoke. So that in modern times like today, we're still wondering what it is. Commonly we accept that it's Hebrew because somebody told us that. But when I look at the Bible more and more, it's not actually very clear to me. And I still have to look into it some more, of course. But at this point, it does not seem very clear to me that Hebrew was their language. There seems to be this battle in the scripture between Aramaic and Hebrew. And then Hebrew itself is just a big problem to me. Very big. Very big. But the Jews' language, it just sounds like the text is trying to tell you something about their language or who the speakers were, but don't quite want you to have it so easy in understanding that it is actually Hebrew. It's like the text is trying to let you know that you should be, if you're guessing about what language it is, then feel at home with that thought, because that was the intention of putting it like that, the Jews' language. Then now, if we look at Egypt, ancient Egypt, I've been wondering, I've heard some people say Egypt spoke Hebrew. Well, I mean, if they mean that the ancient Hebrew, that could have been because the Hebrews were there. But when I look at it, it says they spoke Coptic. I guess they got some Egyptian Arabic type of language today. But Coptic in ancient Egypt. And then I'm understanding that Coptic is not a Semitic language as well. Now, if the Hebrews were in Egypt for all kinds of arguments, again, from a book that's supposed to make things very clear to us, here's another argument. Some are saying it could be 250 years, and commonly we say it's 400 years that they were in Egypt, but whatever the numbers are, may the Most High help us all. But let's say they were there for 200 to 400 years. I find nothing in the scriptures that let me know that the Church of Israel spoke Coptic. Now, it seems like our people, like Abraham and others passing through there and so on, would have learned the language or known the language before getting there. For some reason, they seem to have known it before they got there, or they learned it once they got there because they could communicate with them. And Moses would have known to speak in some kind of Egyptian tongue, and probably other languages as well, because Moses was a learned man, it seems. So he would have, working for the government, known different languages of different nations at the time. So if the Church of Israel are slaves in Egypt for a couple hundred years, it then seems that they had their own language, and that the Egyptian had their own, which was Coptic, because normally we are told that the Church of Israel spoke a Semitic language, and since Coptic for Egypt was not Semitic, then the Church of Israel were not speaking Coptic then. They might have known of it and probably could thought a few words or something or whatever. However, whatever the extent of their knowledge would have been, maybe somebody like Aaron might have known more of the Coptic, who knows? But in general, all the Church of Israel, they probably didn't have such good command of the Coptic tongue for Egypt. But they had their own so-called Hebrew language. If it was Hebrew, like whatever in the world it was, they had that language. So if they had that language, which was their own for the Church of Israel, I haven't found as yet anything telling me what that language was. Because when I'm reading the Bible, people look into history and see this and that and say this is what it was, but I'm just wondering, which Hebrew scribe and which holy prophet would scribe and so on would have written the Bible in such a way, or written the scrolls in such a way as to make it hard to tell what our language was, to the point where the Most High had to say in Zephaniah 3:9, I'm going to restore a pure language. And then when I look at the book of Genesis, they're telling us that New Testament was written in Greek, although some people fight that down. But in Greek, and then the Old Testament, which is supposed to be in Hebrew, gets the name Genesis from the Greek. As if there was very little respect in even if you're going to, use other words for the other names of the other books, like from Exodus, at least you couldn't slap on the first book with Bereshit to just give that one book alone as an opening book, give it its Hebrew name, but it's called Genesis from the Greek. So there seems to be a mishmash of the language, some kind of intent in presenting the Bible to the modern world that is clearly not kosher, if I might put it that way. So the moment you pick up the Bible trying to find truth, you understand that you're up for a war, and things are not as clear-cut as it is. So I hope after a couple of these videos that I've done for a while, although I got off it, I'm obviously starting to pick it back up, that you can at least understand my search. I'm trying to find some stuff. Because if the Church of Israel are in Egypt and they've got their own language, which they've been speaking all along, they've got their own tongue, and then later on after they come out, then again you're hearing about the Jews' language as if they're afraid of mentioning this language. What it's telling me is that it just seems to me that somehow someone is trying to ensure that we or the world is not settled on what that language was that the Hebrews had or the patriarchs had. And if you find it, it has to be through a lot of headaches. So what really was that language? Is it Hebrew? And from the little stuff I'm reading and so on, it just seems to me like it could be some type of an African language. That's the kind of sense I'm getting more and more. But yeah, I'm still searching because I just don't know if this Hebrew, whether modern or ancient Hebrew or Paleo Hebrew that you want to tell me, was actually the language. Because I bought into the Paleo Hebrew because people are saying, well, it's because you're dealing with the modern Hebrew. The Paleo Hebrew is where it's at. Now, as far as I understand, the Paleo Hebrew is, and so many people say it's not hard to find it. Just run a search on that. The Canaanite language. And maybe I'll just end it here. Just to say that it seems really strange to me that the Most High took Israel out of bondage from Egypt and said, I'm going to give you this land here. Go in there, all these Canaanites, wipe them out, break down their gods, don't worship their gods, stuff like that. Get rid of, basically their lifestyle. You shouldn't have anything to do with it. But then give them their tongue to speak. Is it a case that Hebrew or the Paleo Hebrew is the language of the ancient Hebrews, but the Canaanites were speaking it as well? That to me is a problem. Just as if I would say it another way by saying, is it then the case that the Hebrews were sharing the same kind of language with the Canaanites, or one of the languages with the Canaanites? Because if the Paleo Hebrew is a Canaanite tongue, why are you having a set-apart God, a set-apart book with set-apart commandments, a set-apart Torah given to you and written down in a Canaanite tongue, when all that I learned of the Canaanites in the Bible leads me to believe that the Canaanites were wicked and were not set apart. Everything about them was so bad that the Most High says, destroy them. And at one point he only eased up by saying, if actually, if you kill them all, the land's just going to get overrun by beasts, and the wild beasts are going to attack you. And that seems to have been the main reason why some of them were allowed to live. But other than that, it's like get rid of everything that has to do with these Canaanites. Drive them out of the land. And so you got Joshua and all these people coming now and fighting and killing all these people that they never met before, probably in their life. Never saw them before. Might have heard of them, but never saw them before. And it was nothing to just pick up an axe and kill them. Because they were so wicked, evil with their gods that they were offering up children to, and so on, their children and people they were offering and sacrifice up unto them. Moses says, wipe them out for the evil upon the earth that they're doing. But you have their language, a Canaanite tongue. Because is Hebrew a Canaanite tongue? And so a holy book is written with an unholy tongue. And we say Hebrew is our language.